Hey, everybody, it is Trags, Mike Petralia, back with another installment of the Jungle Roar podcast, brought to you by our great friends at Prize Picks and, of course, the fabulous team that I work with at CLNS Media. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the pod. Long time since I've had this Bengals expert on, and he is a certified Bengals expert, as most of you in the audience already know. He is the one and only Joe Goodberry of Bengals on the Brain. Of course, does a lot of work with Jake Liskow on Locked On Bengals as well. But Bengals on the Brain, Joe, you had some fabulous news that your followers, your audience, got to hear from you a couple of weeks ago. Tell us about your new venture and how you are expanding Bengals on the Brain.
Well, thanks for having me on, Mike, again. Yeah, I've been talking about the Bengals, covering them from afar, right? I'm not with you guys in the traditional media, but for 19 years, I've been on Twitter. That's where it started in a lot of ways, or blogging, back on Cincy Jungle, the SB Nation days, almost 20 years ago at this point, making posts there, things like that. And it just snowballed into a career very slowly at first. It took some time. But over the years, I've gotten better opportunities, more opportunities, from writing at The Athletic was probably the peak of my writing days, to podcasting with Locked On Bengals, and then making YouTube videos and continuing with social media and social media posts, until the point where I was like, you know what? I should probably chase this thing and see if I can do it full time, which at this point, I know I can. I'm secure enough in the positions I have now, which is still a scary thing to do and admit and go for, especially when you have a family and kids that are depending on you. But the people that consume the content and appreciate the work I do have made it possible. So I'm excited to do that for the full time this year.
So how can people follow you? What has changed about your coverage, or what will be changing about your coverage going forward?
Well, you'll get more of it. You'll get it more streamlined. The Locked On Bengals podcast is a daily podcast, so you'll hear me there every single day. The best place to find me on social media is at Joe Goodberry on Twitter, but now I'll start posting on all the other platforms as well. I've been pretty much strictly Twitter and YouTube, but yeah, if you'll see me on TikTok at Goodberry NFL and on Instagram at Joe Goodberry. If you see me this season, don't be shocked, because I'm going to attack this thing from all social media angles.
I think your audience and your following is super excited, simply because now they're going to get more of your breakdowns and your film breakdown. And I don't think and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, I don't think there's anybody that does a better job breaking down films, especially immediately in the aftermath of a game, or the next day when we get the all 22s. Breaking down the whys and the wherefores of what happened with the Bengals the day before. And so I think that is fabulous news. So everybody, please go follow Joe Goodberry. You are a Bengals expert, and that is why we're having you on, Joe.
Thank you.
Everybody has an opinion. You're very welcome. Everybody has an opinion about the type of offseason the Bengals have had to this point. Look, I think the general consensus is the front office did everything, and maybe a little bit more than was expected, to upgrade this roster, obviously on the defensive side of the ball. Is the Dexter Lawrence move the slam dunk of the offseason in terms of what sticks out the most, or are there other things that this front office did, Joe, that stand out to you that are going to make a real big difference in 2026?
I think it is the Dexter Lawrence move that makes this all work, because if you look at the individuals they signed in free agency before that move, right? The Brian Cooks, good player, but is he a superstar? Is he a Pro Bowl potential? Same with Boye Mafe, good player, pass rusher. Is he going to give you 12, 13 sacks? Can he be that number one pass rusher that you lost in Trey Hendrickson? There were questions, I think, as we got to the end of free agency of, did they do enough? And you could always argue they could still add a linebacker or a slot corner or wherever you want to go. But up until the trade point, I was like, it's a C, maybe C plus offseason. I don't think it was the offseason that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and some of the stars were almost pleading for and asking for in like Radio Row leading up to the Super Bowl, of where's the big, I think it was T and Jamar talking about Max Crosby or Jeffrey Simmons and all the names that were getting thrown out there. Dexter Lawrence was never at that point, but I'm sure had we have had any idea at that time that he would be on the market,
Right.
his name would have been brought up as well. So I think until that point, it was, I wish they did more. And then the Dexter Lawrence trade is so out of the norm for what the Bengals typically do in terms of trading away a pick, a high premium pick like that. The league doesn't do that often. So it's not just the Bengals, but, especially the Bengals doing this. I think it shows a bigger picture of the landscape of how you acquire talent in today's NFL, number one. But number two, for the Bengals to do it and to get the big fish and to get the star on the defensive side, I think that just rejuvenated not just the fan base, but you can see it permeating into the locker room and through all the media we get, right? Like it's all, you can feel the different vibrations that, okay, that's an all-in type move that we've asked for a long time. And when you do that, I don't care where you work as a listener, like wherever your job is, if your boss or that organization has something that really like everyone's been asking for, and it could be an extra week vacation, it could be a party, it can be something simple, but they finally do it and they finally invest and they finally give you guys what you've been asking for. That has, like, everyone feels that the energy is completely different afterwards. And I think that's going to have a major impact.
So here's where I think Dexter Lawrence will have the biggest impact. It's not what he's going to do in the middle of the interior or the middle of the Bengals defensive line. It's the domino effect he's going to have on other players around him and how offensive lines, and we can get into this and your take on this, how offensive lines are going to have to change their schemes and commit a big part of their schemes to taking care of Dexter Lawrence in the middle of the line so he doesn't destroy that. But in doing that, you should theoretically be able to free up the Boye Mafes. The Miles Murphy, he came on a little bit, I thought, and I think a lot of people, including yourself, probably thought at the end of last year, and Shamar Stewart. You're going to free up pieces on the edge to try and disrupt. So you're not just going into every obvious pass situation thinking, okay, if Trey Hendrickson doesn't get home, we're screwed. And the opposing offenses know this. So they're going to say, make sure Trey doesn't get to the quarterback and we'll be good. That I don't think that is at all the case this year with the Bengals defensive front. And that's where I think Dexter Lawrence will have the biggest impact.
Yeah, I agree. I think the X's and O's aspect of that is you can only do so much when your number one winner is an edge guy that only plays pretty much one spot. Like Trey played 99% of his snaps at right defensive end, right? That's where he rushed from. So there's only so many things you can do to either try to free him up or try to give him the best possible lane to get there. Like if the other guys are containing, we're pushing the pocket through the middle and we're saying, okay, Trey, you are our winner. You win on this play. There's not many more variations you can run off that. You saw when Trey went down, their stunts and twists got a little more dynamic, the things they could do, who they were setting up as their winner on the defensive line started to change, and they could flex different guys in different positions and different roles. And that was helpful for the second half of the season. Now, I don't know if, like, production-wise, that means you were a better pass rush team without having that number one guy. That's still a very valuable thing in the NFL. But when that number one guy is a nose tackle, which is super rare to have one of the best pass rushers in the league play in the A-gap and line up in the A-gap as much as Dexter Lawrence does, but it allows you to do so much more from the middle out. And forcing offensive lines to block inward and account for that guy inward first creates so many more opportunities for even the defensive tackles next to him and then the edge guys. And now you can do so many more variations of what you want to do to free one guy up. It's not always going to be about freeing up Dexter Lawrence. It may be, hey, Dexter's going to get doubled because he's a D tackle and a nose tackle. Like D ends don't get doubled as much. They get chipped. It's a different thing. Defensive tackles get doubled. And because of it now, it's going to free up these other guys. And it's allow you to pick and choose and add Cassius Howell into that too. It wasn't mentioned.
Right.
You can pick, all right, this guy, it's your turn to win, or multiple guys will have an opportunity to win because you can do so many more things.
So I'm glad you mentioned Cassius Howell because as you were saying that name popped into my brain. And funny, I should use that term talking to you. Cassius Howell. How will Al Golden best make use of him this year, do you think, as a rookie?
One of the things we kept talking about last offseason when Al Golden was hired was this Viper role, which is more of a stand-up edge guy, kind of in a 3-3-5 defense which means 3 down linemen, 3 linebackers. But really, that third linebacker isn't truly a linebacker. He can come down into the slot. He can go to the line of scrimmage. He can drop into coverage. He can pass rush. He can blitz. You can move him all around, do a lot of different things. They really didn't have that guy they could do that with on the roster last year. So it was a big offseason topic last year that never came to fruition because they really didn't have it. So it's funny that going through the draft process, we're looking at all these guys like a Reuben Bain in the first round. He doesn't really fit that. There's a lot of pass rushers. And we kind of forgot about the Viper thing. We just thought, man, maybe it's not a thing Golden's going to do at the NFL level. And then as soon as they draft Cassius Howell, you go, yeah, of course. That's exactly, he must have identified we didn't have that guy. And one of the things on tape last year that really bugged me about this defense, and a lot of negative plays came from it, is when they would reduce Demetrius Knight into that role, into the Sam linebacker edge guy. They'd bring him down there. They'd rotate the D-line inwards. And now Shamar Stewart's at D-tackle, which he's going to do a lot. But the focus there was Demetrius Knight can't hold up against tackles and tight ends that are sealing him and walling him inside, and they're pitching it outside and running right around him. That's just not what he is. He's not big enough to do that. He's not that same type of player. So when you take a Cassius Howell, and I think interestingly enough, when you claim a guy like Antoine Powell-Ryland, who is bottom of the roster, but a very similar used guy in college and similar size to Cassius Howell, when you see that and you go, okay, that makes a lot of sense. They saw a position of need. Boye Mafe fits us a lot in what he did with Seattle's defense as well. So I think that's what we're looking at. Is that a full-time thing? Is this something they rotate in? I think the interesting part is Boye Mafe. If Mafe is there and plays a lot of that, that's your starter at that spot. And then we'll see Cassius Howell rotate in there. I'm really interested to see what that pass rush, the obvious pass rush situation D-line looks like. I assume Dexter Lawrence is going to be in there. Well, who's the other D tackle? Is it going to be Jonathan Allen? Do you not even use another D tackle? Do you use Shamar Stewart at that spot and let him just crash and be a maniac out there? And then you put Boye Mafe at 1, and then is it Murphy or is it Cassius Howell? I think you have an argument for Howell could be a better pass rusher depending on if he hits the ground running.
The New York Giants back in the 2010s, even in the latter part of the 2000s, made the NASCAR front very, very popular. Do you think that is something that we could see from Al Golden and the Bengals at least a few times?
100%. That was Justin Tuck, Notre Dame, player who would kick inside and would absolutely kill people at defensive tackle, because those guys who don't have the same type of change of direction or agility, side to side burst at defensive end, you kick them inside the D tackle. I'm thinking of Shamar Stewart here, who's very linearly straight line, explosive, fast, and strong, but doesn't have the lateral bend and doesn't win with his hands a lot on the edge. Kick him inside, and they did a lot last year. Percentage wise, they moved him more inside than Texas A&M did, which was a big critique about Shamar coming out, is, hey, he played a lot of D tackle. That's why he didn't have the production. Get him on the edge more. I disagreed with that completely. I thought put him inside, let him be like a Danico Autry type guy, a butt kicker in there. I think they will do this. I think that's the path for getting Shamar on the field, number one, after you've added 2 edge rushers this offseason. And then number 2, because if you can stop the run on early downs, which would be a big thing for them this year, we'll have to see if that starts right away. It was something they were much better at in the second half of the year. If they can do that from the start, they'll have more obvious pass rush situations. That's when you get the nickel package. That's the NASCAR nickel, where you're really getting all of your fast guys on that D-line and letting them do work. And I think that's the best way to use these 4 pass rushers they have.
It's interesting. You bring up the first down and, the down and distance situation, Joe, because I think the problem with the Bengals offense, and we'll get to that in a little while, is they didn't have enough second and short, third and shorts, and they've got to definitely work on that. Bengals offense is the flip of that, or Bengals defense was the flip of that, right? Giving up way too much in the run game, even in the short passing game on first down, and not creating second and long and third and medium or third and long situations where they can really go to town and eat.
They were bottom of the league for tackles, I believe 1 to 2 yards from the line of scrimmage, and bottom of the league for tackles for a loss. And tackles for a loss have been an issue for them for a while. They're just not a penetrating style attacking defense, especially in the first half of the year. They were very read, react. which is fine if you have really good players and space eaters up front. I thought they struggled with that. Slayton struggled in the beginning of the year to be that 2-gap guy. I thought he was much better in the second half when the entire defense was more react, see what happens, and then finish the play, right? That is an aggressive style defense that everyone says they want, but I think truthfully, defensive coordinators want the read, react, keep it safe. And as long as everyone knows what they're doing, they make the play, will force the punt, right? Bend but don't break style. The attacking style worked for them much better last year because they do have athletes. They do have a lot of guys they've drafted very highly. These are guys with good pedigree that can make splash plays, but everyone's got to buy in, play with that energy, and finish the plays. It's got to be a much better tackling team for that to actually work down to down. So if they can create more success on those first downs, have those more 1-yard gains or even tackles for a loss, yeah, the defense, I think this is true on both sides. The story for the season of what happens if the Bengals win on first down on both sides of the ball, be a much different outcome.
He's Joe Goodberry, does a fabulous job breaking down all things Bengals and creating great Bengals content for Bengals on the Brain. It's a scorching sports summer, and you can make all of your picks on Prize Picks. The WNBA and baseball are heating up, and with big tennis slams and major golf tournaments on the horizon, you can make your picks for all of these events and more all summer long on Prize Picks, America's #1 sports pick app. Get into soccer this summer with Prize Picks. They're offering everything from group stage winners to goals scored. I'm excited to watch the big stars from countries like Argentina and Messi, Brazil, France, and unfortunately, we are saying goodbye to the U.S. soccer team. But all of you can win money while making your picks following the big soccer tournament. What's cool is that I can stack game winners from soccer, NBA, the W, and baseball on top of my player picks for even bigger payouts. The entire summer of soccer is indeed on Prize Picks, all 48 countries and every matchup. And if you rep your side during this tournament on Prize Picks, you could win a trip to the final next week in New York. It's the biggest tournament ever, which means there's even more opportunities to cash in while you root for your favorite national sides and global soccer stars. Download the app today and use that code CLNS to get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today, use that code CLNS, get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Prize Picks, a preferred partner of the NBA. Back with Joe Goodberry of Bengals on the Brain. I want to talk about Dax Hill and where I know you have written about him this week and talked about him on Locked On, where you think he fits in this Bengals defense and what kind of year he could be putting himself up for as he enters the final year of his contract.
I'm a big Dax Hill fan. Number one, I thought he kind of got a raw deal in the start of this thing. And when he was groomed to be the air replacement to Jesse Bates, right, as the free safety in this defense, that's not what he did at Michigan. I think that's a big role and a big ask. That is a very specialized position to have a true free safety. Not every team even has one, right? A lot of teams are trying to fit a guy in there. And the Bengals did that with Nick Scott and Dax that second year, I guess, for him. And it didn't work out. But even then, I thought the flashes of when he knew what he was doing and could trigger and go and go make a play, I was like, he's going to be fine in time. Do they have the time to give him? We got our answer right away. They did not. And he eventually moved to the boundary corner, which I thought in 2024, he looked good until he got hurt. I'm like, okay, boundary corner might be it. And then last year they wanted to move him into the slot. I didn't disagree with that idea. I thought here you have a bigger, faster slot guy than what you've typically had with Mike Hilton, which can be a big advantage to any defenses. A lot of defenses are kicking their slowest guy into the slot, but a lot of production from NFL teams are coming from that position. And you've got to put a better corner, a better defender in that spot. You see the Seattle Seahawks, they just won the Super Bowl, right? They've got a safety as a slot corner in Nick Eamon-Worry. You get the size, speed type guy in there. It helps you defend the run, and it creates a little something different for these slot receivers to look at. I thought the Bengals had the right idea. They didn't really unleash Dax last year until they got to that midway point, and they said, you know what? We've got to mix this thing up. Cam Taylor-Britt went out for the year. They said, Dax, you're going to the outside. Jalen Davis, you're going to take over as a slot corner. And he was excellent. At this point, we knew DJ Turner was good. So it created a different dynamic where DJ's following the number one for the Bengals defense, and Dax is just kind of off on his side, playing the outside. And next thing you know, you lift your head up 4 weeks later and you go, actually, I don't remember the last time Dax has been beat out there. Like they don't target him. Nothing's happening. He gave up, I think it was 1.8 catch per game and about 17 yards per game over the final 6 weeks. And I think it was 7 weeks. He didn't get targeted in that second Ravens game. You look at it and you go, they're not even testing him. And then I went back and watched all the targets and all the snaps from that final stretch of games. And he was really, really good. And the biggest thing that jumped out to me is not only he's always been long, fast, pretty athletic. And then you could see the recovery from the knee injury. That full year, when you hit that point, usually when these guys start to, accelerate again in their development. And you could see that with Dax. But the thing that jumped out to me was the mental aspect, how he understood route combos, how they were trying to attack him from the outside, which again, he has never been a boundary corner. So for him to understand that now at this point and be able to jump on routes and combination routes and in zone, be able to take away 2 guys at times or react super quick to make a tackle really fast after the catch, I was really impressed with that. And I started to see it in his pass breakups as well, getting to the ball quicker. 5 pass breakups in those final 7 weeks. That's a pretty good rate over the course of a season. To me, Dax looked like I wouldn't accept, if I'm him, if I was his camp, if I was his agent, and the Bengals offered 15, 16, 17, 18, I'd say no. One more year like this, and he's getting $25 million in free agency. I think he played really, really well last year.
You see him at that level of corner.
I do. I think you can be that for sure, because you're not getting too many guys that are 6 foot plus at corner, 6'1" with the long arms, right? I think it's for him to be able to move the way he does, even after post-injury, he's a rare blend of a player.
Okay, then let's flip over to the other side, DJ Turner. And it's interesting. I saw you tweeted out something that had DJ Turner. They were ranking the top 15 corners in the NFL. He came in at number 15. He is gaining more and more respect around the National Football League. Why is that?
Yeah, it's funny because as we were doing this list on Locked On, we're thinking after his agent had that post on Instagram where it was cornerback money 1 coming soon. And I'm like, what is cornerback 1 money? And I looked at the top 10 paid corners in the league. They average about $25 million for the top 10 guys. And I'm like, ooh, that seems like a lot of money, right? And this is where I came up with the idea where Dax could get that in a year if he plays the way he has shown. And I'm like, DJ's already there then. If he's already a top 10 corner, at least if his agency thinks that, and he thinks that, why wouldn't he think that? He played tremendous last year. And then I started to rank him, and we started to talk about it. And then you see ESPN's rankings and they got him as a 15. Fine. And those guys up for contract, maybe they want top 10 money. But what makes DJ Turner so good is that he is hyper athletic and fast, quick twitch. He's a hummingbird out there, right? You can change direction very, very quickly. And when I use the word like a hummingbird to describe him, go back to his rookie year, he was in the hip pocket. He was the shadow of these receivers, but he couldn't really affect the play, right? He looked small, very small at that point. Couldn't always knock balls away, couldn't find it, just really could not affect the receiver or knock him off his spot or really disrupt him at the catch point. Over the last couple of years now, I think that has progressed very well in his favor. He's seeing the ball better. He tracks the ball better. He's knocking them away. 17 pass breakups. I think NFL.com had it for 18 last year. PFF had it 13, however you want to count them. He had a lot and was near the top of the league. That part of his game has gotten so much better. He's not the best tackler. He's not the best run defender. I think if I were to compare the two, Dax is the better of those two. But in man coverage, L. Golden's defense, 10th highest man coverage rate last year. They need man cover guys, and DJ is one of the best in the league at that, and those guys tend to get paid.
Kyle Duggar. Now, you mentioned Nick Emmanwori coming down and playing the slot from a safety position. I think Duggar could do the same thing. I know he did that with the Patriots a decent amount. Belichick, when he drafted him, saw a lot of versatility in that regard. I think Kyle Duggar is a sneaky, interesting signing for the Bengals in terms of what he could do on the back end of the defense.
I agree completely. Yeah, Kyle Duggar was one of the original to do that of this generation. There's been guys that did it in the past, but of this generation of player, When Duggar was drafted, it was like, whoa, this is a freaky athlete with really good size that can come down, cover tight ends, play in the box. And he's done it a bunch. But when he got paid with the Patriots, they were like, oh, you're more of a true safety at this point. And his production kind of fell off a little bit, ultimately being traded last year and had a solid year for the Steelers. I thought when the Bengals originally signed him, we didn't get his numbers, his contract numbers. I think it was like 10 days after he was signed. And that's your first warning that it's usually going to be a lot lower than what I thought he could have gotten in free agency. And that was the only thing that gave me pause for what he could do for that. But for that 10 days, I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be their answer in the slot because they haven't addressed that position yet. And this is before the draft too. So maybe they were still going to go in the draft and get a guy. But at the time I was like, Duggar can be that box guy that comes in, helps you in run support in nickel, because you want to be able to defend the run in nickel, and you want to be able to defend the pass from your base defense, right? Because that's how offenses are going to try and put you in a disadvantage right, and then attack from there. So can the Bengals do that with Duggar? Yes, they can. And can he cover tight ends? For sure. This is what he has done. But when I saw the deal and it was almost vet minimum, I'm like, that's maybe they're not going to do it. And I'm still, fingers are crossed, that we see sometime in camp a specialized package for Kyle Duggar.
Yeah, I'm just fascinated by that and where they could put him in that defense. You mentioned Brian Cook earlier, and he is, in your words, paraphrasing what you said earlier, Joe, he is a very solid veteran with Super Bowl experience, and he's dependable, but he's not maybe the high-ranking playmaker that I think a lot of fans think that he might be coming into town, but he is certainly, I think, on paper, a much better improvement over Geno Stone and Nick. I'm drawing a blank. Nick Scott over the last couple of years at that safety position.
Yeah, this should be the best safety they've brought in post Jesse Bates, right? And they've really struggled with that transition. It's in their history, they've had too many of these, right? Where they allow a guy in their prime to walk, and they're wandering through the desert for far too long looking for that replacement. They may have found it partially here. I don't think that Cook is Jesse Bates. Like, Bates to me is Pro Bowl, all pro, rare free safety. Now Cook is a free safety, but he's a free safety that isn't the most athletic guy. I think he's decent in everything. He's not the fastest, very similar to Jordan Battle, where they're adequate. They pass the line of what you're looking for, the threshold as a starting safety, but a very good tackling, maybe the best tackling free safety in the league and on the market for sure this offseason, which is the big difference between he and Geno Stone. Stone was such a liability there. And I think just energy waned too often. Intensity was inconsistent with Stone. You're not going to have those questions with Cook. He's never shown that in college. He didn't show that with the Chiefs at all. So unless something's in the water in Cincinnati that will turn him, into picking and choosing, and making those business decisions, I expect you have a free safety thumper that wants to set the tone and will tackle aggressively. That is a very key component to this defense in getting off the field and getting to those advantageous third downs. And I really like Brian Cook. I think he's going to be a captain right away.
28 minutes and 25 seconds into this podcast, and we really have not touched on Joe Burrow and the offense. Shame on me. I'm the host of the podcast. I should probably do a better job directing it. But Joe Burrow, where can the offense go and take that? How does Joe Burrow and the offense take that next step in 2026?
That is the question. It's funny because if we go and look at the Joe Burrow era as a whole, let's say 2021 after his rookie season, right? Because why should we count the rookie season? Everyone's better after that. If we say 21 to 2025, when he's on the field, they're a top 5 to 7 offense pretty routinely in terms of EPA per play, in terms of success rate, but their explosive plays have dropped since 2021. And so they become incredibly efficient at everything else other than creating the explosives. And if you go and look at what are other teams doing to get these, how can the 49ers with less weapons, let's say, or a worse quarterback, although they're good in those situations, even sometimes with Mac Jones out there, let's say, why are they so much more explosive? What are the differences in these teams? Why bring up the Seahawks again with Sam Darnold? Why first half of the year? They were the most explosive offense we've ever seen, from a completion percentage to a yards per attempt rate. They were greatest show on turf touching those numbers. And it's like, how can they do that, but the Bengals can't? They can't get to that level. Like 5-7 on offense is great, but why aren't they number 1 or 2 or 3? And the big thing that these teams are doing is a strong commitment to the run game, number 1. And even Seattle didn't have a good run game in the first half of the year, but they stayed with it and made everything look the same. Their passing game and play action game in the run game looked very similar up until that inflection point where the quarterback pulls it out and drops the pass, right? So you're really dictating to the defense and controlling what the defense can do and how many different looks they can give you. And you're staying ahead of the chains, and you're really playing your game pretty consistently and hitting the big shots, the big crossers off of play action. You look around the league, and teams are creating explosive plays at 4 times the rate off play action as just straight up dropping back from shotgun. And I think largely because of the way defenses treat the Bengals, when it looks like an obvious passing situation, they're playing 2 safeties back. They don't want Jamar Chase and T. Higgins to just streak down the field and beat them, right? They are a very scary passing offense. They get treated, the prime Chiefs from like 2019 to 2024 were treated, the only other team like this on tape. When you watch tape of other teams, you start to see they are scared to death of the Bengals passing offenses. Defenses are not treating them like other teams. It is so much slanted one way that it is almost disrespectful to the Bengals' ability to run the ball. And because they haven't been a great running team up until last year. And the second half of the year, they figured it out and started to have a great efficiency rating, success rate, EPA per play. And still, by the end of the year, defenses weren't cracking. They still said, we don't care. We don't believe it. We don't think you're a good running team. We don't think you'll stick with the running game, even if you're averaging 5 yards per carry. So what can the Bengals? This is a long answer to say. What can the Bengals do? It's probably sticking with it and believing in it for longer, because it is so tempting that on the first sign of failure or maybe some struggle on the ground where you say, what are we doing? We've got Joe Burrow. We've got T. Higgins. We got Jamar Chase. We got Mike Gesicki. Chase Brown's one of the best receiving backs in the league. We don't have to bang our head into the wall 5 times and punt, drop back and throw it. And we know at the very least that can give you a top 5-7 offense.
So my answer to that is, and I'm going to quote Bill Belichick because I was around him so often. He's like, the number one directive of the offense is to score points. I don't care how you do it. Ideally, sure, you'd like to take time off the clock all the time and control the game that way. But for the first 3 quarters of the game, before you truly get to the time management part of the game in the fourth quarter, I want to put up as many points as possible. And I think Zach Taylor has that same mindset. I think Joe Burrow has that same mindset. And they feel that the best way to do that is to use their weapons. My only problem with that is, to your point, nobody takes the Bengals' run game seriously. And I'm going to ask you right now, do you think the Bengals are better off if Joe Burrow is playing a higher percentage of snaps under center just to keep the defense honest?
That is an extremely tough question, because you're right. They are better when they're not under center. They are better when they're not using play action. Go back to the Joe Burrow complete era. They complete passes at a higher rate when they're not using play action. Now, I should start this by saying the rest of the league is the complete opposite. The rest of the league completes a higher percentage of passes at higher yards per attempt, at a better passer rating, and they get pressured less and they get sacked less when using play action. All of that does not apply to the Bengals. It is the exact opposite. And they're they're a big outlier here. No, they complete a lower percentage of passes. They get pressured a little bit more. The sack rate is down by like 1%, but the yards per attempt isn't as high. Like everything across the board, his passer rating drops. Can you afford to be a little bit worse passing? And maybe not a little bit worse. They go from number 1 passing efficiency in straight drop back to like 22nd. Like, is that worth it? Can they afford to do that when the defense has been as poor as it's been the last few years? They cannot. And that's the bit, like, that's why quickly they say, let's just drop back and throw, because we have to score 30 today. If the defense can be complementary, yeah, maybe you can afford to be a little bit less efficient. to maybe score 4 to 7 less points in a game. They have not been afforded that ability the last 3 years. So that is a very tough question. Can they afford to be worse on offense for the sake of keeping Burrow healthy? Maybe he doesn't get a hit as much. Maybe you run the ball more. So maybe instead of dropping back 620 times, you drop back 520. So we just shave off a couple. Is that worth it if he's ready to go in January rather than what they've dealt with 2 out of the last 3 years? Maybe.
What two players, you mentioned one of them already, Chase Brown. The other one under the spotlight, I think, coming into training camp is Andre Yosibach. And can he really step forward and grab that number 3 receiver spot by the throat, hold on to it, and say, this is mine. I'm going to be your number 3 guy. And I'm curious to get your read on what Yoshi has to do to really establish himself as the number 3 reliable receiver in the Bengal offense, because a lot of fans, and you know this, Joe, a lot of fans have criticized Yoshi. He even mentioned it, that he's aware of that criticism out there. Some of the key drop passes last season that occurred at critical moments of the game, and including one game that I think a drop pass probably cost them the game. He has been under the spotlight a lot this offseason. I'm curious where you see Yoshi coming into this year.
Yeah, I think those big critical moments have defined him as of late, because there were some nice off-script plays, low red zone plays early in his career where he and Burrow were going, connecting on touchdowns. And it's like, man, this Yoshi guy can play. He can help this team. And then last year, it just seemed like he had too many of those failures in those big moments. And now, let's put it out there, like the Bengals, number 1, don't want to throw the ball to Andre Yosibach. And I say that because they want 160 plus targets to go to Jamar Chase. They want another 120 plus to go to T. Higgins. That is a lot of your offense. Now, Chase Brown is at the 85 range. If Gesicki's healthy the whole year, he may be in the 85. Those are your top 4 options. I know the wide receiver 3, that label of being that and how much that guy can be. Can he be a Tyler Boyd? They've replaced the Tyler Boyd portion with Gesicki and Chase Brown, a lot of that.
Right.
Yoshi really has to be a complementary piece. And if you come through in the clutch and make those third down grabs when the defense is really not letting Jamar and T do anything, and Yoshi can make a play, great. We need that. You're going to have to make those plays if this team ever goes to where we want them to be. You'll make a bunch of those plays on the road to that, that end goal. But in between, what does Yoshi do really, really well? He is a big, fast guy that can play all 3 wide receiver positions. That is valuable in getting the guys that you want the ball to go to help them get open. Because when you can put him in the slot and he can scream upfield at running a 4-3-5 and run a clear out route, and then T is digging behind him at 15 yards, the defense has to respect Yoshi, because he will blow by your safety if you don't run with him and turn and give him that help. There are a lot of plays when I watch on tape where Yoshi is integral to that play, but really only running a clear out route or getting Chase open or T open. And that is valuable. You can't put, like I had someone the other day say, well, they should sign a DeAndre Hopkins to be wide receiver 3. Hopkins can't run that. Hopkins is not going to run downfield at the same speed and threaten this defense in the same way. Sure, he would have the name and the respect, but no, defensive coordinator is still worrying about the guy that's 6'4" running down the field at a very fast rate. And if Burrow wants to throw it, it could be a big problem. So when you watch it on tape, he's very integral. And I would say the frustration for me is he's not great after the catch. He never was in college. He hasn't been throughout his career. And I think sometimes the Bengals have put plays in for him where I'm like, that's just not what he should be doing, right? If they understood a little bit more of what he was good at, and maybe they like him a lot more than what he actually is. I think he's a good dude, right? He's got a very marketable face and personality. I think when they show him and promote him the way he does, it raises the expectations for what he can be, in the organization. What he is a complementary piece. Wide receiver 3 at best, probably a wide receiver 4, depth guy that you can rotate at any position, and that's valuable. But let's not make him something that he isn't. Let's let him be a complementary piece.
Chase Brown, what does he need to do, and what does the offense need to do to support him to get him off to a fast start, so we're not waiting 6, 7, 8 games for him to see the explosive Chase Brown?
Yeah, the first half of the year averaged 2.7 yards per carry in the first 6 weeks. The final 11 games was a 5.2 yards per carry. I mean, big difference. If he averages 5.2 yards per carry, if he has the same rate, we're talking about close to 1,800 all-purpose yards. Would be a huge season in Bengals history, right? I don't expect that to be the case, or maybe I don't know. I honestly don't know, because he's been a pretty durable player. He's been a bell cow despite being about 210 pounds. He was at Illinois, averaged 27 touches per game at Illinois. And there's been times here where P. Ryan's gone down and they said, Chase Brown, you're not coming off the field today. We're not going to running back number 3. You're getting 99% of the snaps and touches from this position. And he's held up fine and had some of his best games from that role. So could he do that in a full season? I mean, maybe. And it could the offense hit the ground running the ball from week 1? Sure, I think they could. I think largely because last year, no run game coordinator. James Casey, the tight end coach, who is now the run game coordinator, must have had a big hand in fixing this thing. But at week 3, that Vikings game, I watched the tape come off of that one. That's Jake Browning's first start, right? And yes, I said, right. And maybe some of what I'm going to say is probably because you had a backup in there and things look disjointed sometimes when that happens. But I came away from the tape. My evaluation was, this is the worst run game I have ever seen on film. And this is my 18th season doing film evaluations. And it was that bad. That wasn't being hyperbolic. That was, whoa, they are disjointed. They are not working at the same pace. They're not at the same intensity. They're not hitting their marks at the right time. And I don't even have to know what they're really being asked to do. I just know that does not look right or like a well-oiled machine at all. To go from that point, where I thought it was as low as possible, to at the end of the year, I was thoroughly impressed with everything they were doing on the ground, from the run blocking up front, how fast they're moving together, how well they're moving together, communication, timing, hitting their marks, getting to the second level, which is something they've struggled with for a long time, but getting to the second level and eliminating linebackers or staying on them, to the running backs and their flow within the offense, Chase Brown especially, but I thought even P. Ryan had a lot of very good explosive plays for what they ask him to do. He's really strictly the shotgun inside gap runner, where Chase Brown gets the wide zone stuff from under center, and he's been really good at that. So maybe they do it more, maybe they lean on it a little bit more. But to get to the end of the year, and they end up, if you just look at from that Vikings game, they end up number 1 in EPA per rush last year, number 3 in success rate on the ground. Like that, if that carries over, you want to know how this offense gets to the next level? If they can run at will, or at least, and people say, well, they only had this many yards last year. They're not a great running team. They were 31st in rush yards. I don't care. They're going to throw the ball. And if they can, when they get on the ground, be successful at being a complementary piece to this passing game, that will unlock this offense. That'll make this offense so much more efficient. You would almost expect them to score on every single possession if the run game looks like that. And could they hit the ground running like that? Sure, they could, because I think they have streamlined what made them good, and now they can start that way.
So much talk, Joe, about the personnel in the first 43 minutes of this podcast. Zach Taylor, what do you expect from him this year? Do you expect him to drastically change his approach in the way he calls games, in the way he manages games, in the way he utilizes players and keeps them fresh throughout the year?
So my take on Zach Taylor this year is that we should expect an extension at the end of the year rather than worrying about who the next coach is, because I expect this team to be good. And if you get them to January, if Burrow's healthy, they're making the playoffs, right? Is there any Bengals fans that would disagree with that? So put aside what you feel about Zach Taylor and think about that. If Burrow is healthy, this team makes the playoffs. Now, they have been very good in the playoffs. Burrow is at his best when we get to December and January. Zach Taylor's record has been at its best, even without Burrow, with Jake Browning and, even in go to 2019 and 2020. Like, they won some games they shouldn't have. If you're a draft fan, you didn't want them to win these games. You wanted the higher picks. So you remember those days. But they have been at their best in December and January. You get them to that moment again, and if they win a playoff game, get to the division round, let's just say beyond that, we don't know. You don't think Zach Taylor is going to get an extension because clearly this works and gets you into the dance that you want to be in with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and all your weapons? Yeah, I think he would. So let's start with that and just say, okay, that's the expectation. Now, do we expect Zach to do things differently? I do, because if you go throughout his history now from 2019 and on, they have had many pivot moments on the offense, on the entirety of the team, the direction of the team, within games, within seasons, from being a very Rams style offense in 2019, scrapping a lot of that in at the halfway point. I think it was the trip to overseas against the Rams, I want to say, or was it? It was the Rams. Yeah, they scrapped a lot of that on the flight because they was like, it's not working with Joe Mixon. We need to, and he's our guy at this point. Dalton, we're benching him. Like, we got to lean on what we have. And they ended up fielding a competent offense from being terrible for the first half of the year, and then going into, all right, we got to absorb the LSU playbook completely because we're at a truncated offseason. We're not going to have Burrow in here the whole time. We can't go through everything. We got to run the LSU passing offense. And they did. And then found a way to be super explosive in 2021 with Burrow coming off of an injury, with Jamar Chase having a struggles in the summer, and then having really what was the LSU offense and the playbook for the run game for Joe Mixon, and marrying the two to make it all the way to the Super Bowl. And then going to 2022 when defenses said, we're not going to allow you to throw it deep. And then they had to completely scrap the under center stuff because it was too obvious. They were too disjointed between their passing game and run game. And they had to become super efficient against the cover two. And they ended up being the number 2 EPA team in the league against cover two by the end of the year. And that was coming off the Cowboys game going into Jets week. And they figured it out from there. So the pivots and changes they've made, and then going from Callahan to Dan Pitcher and the changes they made there, especially in the run game, and using Chase Brown differently than Joe Mixon and making sure he was a complement to their passing attack. I think they have evolved so much and so often, and that's without even saying Jake Browning looked better than anyone ever expected him to look the first time he had to come in. And then Joe Flacco had some of his best career days as a passer. He's never looked that good before. Joe Flacco's always been very average. He had one great playoff run. No disrespect to Joe Flacco, by the way. We've turned out to really like the guy. But some of his moments here last year was like, whoa, if the Browns couldn't get that out of Flacco, but the Bengals can. There have been enough moments to think that they will pivot and change and scrap things if they have to. And so I assume they will if it comes up.
What do you think the biggest difference has been between Dan Pitcher and Brian Callahan as offensive coordinators?
I think a lot of it is that Pitcher is, and Callahan had this mindset also, as like they saw things through the quarterback lens and through their eyes. But Brian was very West Coast offense background, right? That's what his dad was, wide zone, known for. That was his DNA. He was with John Gruden, right? That's what they ran. So when we saw the offense in like 2020, 2021, and 2022, still a lot of elements of that. And it had varying degrees of success. Like I've talked about with Burrow, his numbers were worse when they were getting under center and doing all these things. The run game, it's hard to lean on a modern day run game unless you are the Ravens with Derrick Henry or Christian McCaffrey. You have one of these guys and it's your entire identity. It's good. It's the backbone of your offense. I think the Bengals, once they realized that they were never going to have that backbone and it's going to be Burrow, Chase Higgins, and Brian Callahan left, and it was Dan Pitcher inserted, they became very QB centric, and every single thing is going to run from the quarterback. And I think rightly it's Joe Burrow, right? Like, we're going to look back at this era and say, this was a great passing offense and some of the best, efficiency and passing game we've ever seen in Cincinnati. And I think the league in general is going to look fondly at the Bengals passing offense. But how can we fit the difference? I think that it goes in hand with Joe Mixon and Chase Brown. How can we go from that running game where you kind of had to cater to Mixon a little bit more and what he was good at, to Chase Brown being a 5th round pick, who's been one of the best picks of that draft now at this point? How can he fit and how can he complement this passing offense? And can we do everything from shotgun, inside zone, gap stuff, and really let it complement and be a piece to really make this offense and this passing offense work? And I think 2024 was the culmination of that, because 2023 was weird with Burrow's calf, and then Browning ultimately had to be inserted, and then Burrow again was hurt week 2 this year. So 2024 is the year we have to look at, and you end up with a triple crown from Jamar Chase and what should have been an MVP season for Joe Burrow. So talk about complementing your stars and your pieces. I think they did that really well.
All right, Joe, you have spent so much time today talking Bengals with us. I want to give you one more opportunity to talk about the fabulous work you do with Bengals on the Brain and how that's expanding and what your next couple of weeks will be like leading up to the opening of training camp on July 29th.
Yeah, so if you like any of this, if you've never listened to me before speak about the Bengals, this is what you should expect. We go into detail, we go in depth on Bengals on the Brain. You can put that in YouTube, it'll come up, and you're going to see plays that I'm talking about. When I'm referencing these things, I'll have the clips, I'll have them drawn up, I'll stop, I'll slow them down, I'll zoom in. We'll really break down to a detail that some people are not interested in. But if you are interested in going deeper, so when you're at that water cooler at work, and you want to know just a little bit more, and you want to be like, actually, on third down, they did this. That's why it happened. Bengals on the Brain is for you because it sounds like you also have Bengals on the Brain.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's a great name for a podcast. I think it's a great name for your site. And I am one of those football nerds that really loves talking the X's and O's. I mean, when you talk about the Bengals in the modern day NFL, so much of it is pop culture. So much of it is about the impact that the Bengals have in the community. And I get all of that, but I want to know why the Bengals do what they do or why they don't do what they should do sometimes. And you are a great guy to talk with and break all of that down, Joe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You know, that actually brings up something else too, that, you know, we have a lot of football fans and Bengals fans that have joined on in the Joe Burrow era, but a lot of football fans recently, the younger generation is very much, they like to be in the sphere of football on Sundays or the primetime game. But I think a lot of them, you have to question sometimes, do you actually like the football aspect of it? And then I try to guide those people into like, here, it can be also fun and entertaining. And the football part is the backbone of it all. But, you know, it can be really interesting.
I'm going to quote the man again, Bill Belichick. The actual fun part of football is the football part.
Yeah.
And I'm paraphrasing there, but that is one of his famous quotes, and it's so true. And I appreciate you being on, Joe. He is Joe Goodberry, does a tremendous job covering all things Cincinnati Bengals and breaking down all things Cincinnati Bengals for Bengals on the Brain. You can, of course, catch him with Jake Liskow. They do a fabulous job on Locked On Bengals. My name is Mike Petraglia, Trags. Want to thank our terrific sponsor, as always, Prize Picks, and the great team at CLNS Media. Until next time, you know the drill. Keep that jungle roaring.